I'm Autumn Brown, front woman of the pop soul band Autumn, a queer science fiction writer, theologian, a mother of dragons, and a healing justice facilitator for social movements living on Dakota and Anishinaabe land, currently known as Minneapolis.
And I'm Adrienne Marie Brown, a fat, Black, queer, witch writer and a gardener of healing ideas. I live in the land of the Shakori, Skurura, Tuscarora, and Lumbee peoples, but today I'm actually recording with Autumn in Minnesota side by side. You see how I said Minnesota?
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Where it's too cold to garden ideas.
It's too cold to garden anything.
And this is How to Survive the End of the World.
Our podcast about learning from apocalypse with grace, rigor, and curiosity.
As a reminder, we have no ads. We are fully listener supported.
So join our Patreon to support our ongoing work and to access exclusive content.
Super exclusive, super content.
Super exclusive, yeah.
Today we are so excited to be joined by, one of, I think, the most special guests we've ever had.
Oh.
Well, I know. I mean, it's a big deal that he's here.
It's very tender and sweet.
I feel like this guest has been years in the making. It's been years in the making, this guest. We are going to be in conversation today with Daniel Hunter. And I'm going to share a little bit about who Daniel is, because Daniel loves to fly under the radar. And so some people don't know about the subtle reaches of Daniel Hunter's influence. Daniel Hunter coaches and trains movements across the globe, the literal whole ass world. As founder of Choose Democracy, he's helped stop Trump's coup attempts.
Period.
He has trained extensively with ethnic minorities in Burma, pastors in Sierra Leone, and independence activists in Northeast India. He has written multiple books, including What Will You Do If Trump Wins?, Climate Resistance Handbook, and Building a Movement to End the New Jim Crow. So I hope all of our listeners can understand why we are so excited and relieved to get to be talking to Daniel today. We're going to have a beautiful conversation, but as per usual, we're going to start with a little check-in. We always like to ask ourselves and to ask our guests, how are you today, right now? And Daniel, would you like to go first and tell us how you're doing today?
You're going to first, thank you for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with all of y'all. I knew you were going to start with a tough question in this moment. This is a tough question. Where am I? I'm everything right now.
Yeah.
All the things. Yeah. So I think two things that are on top that I'm conscious of is, one, I'm feeling very grateful for little things. So today, I just got to finish laundry. That felt like a checklist, excited to get, minor wins. And a second thing, how am I doing, is I'm sad. Whenever I keep asking myself, how do I feel this morning? Sadness is my top of. Sad of the state of, sad about where we are, etc. But in another moment, I'll be angry. Another moment, I find myself moving pretty quickly from one state to the next. So does that work as a check-in?
You kept it real, Daniel. The sadness, the anger, the laundry, that feels so real. Thank you for your check-in, Daniel.
I really resonate with that. There's a sadness. I think of a underground river. It's this is this thing that's flowing and it's wide and it's under everything. So I'm also feeling that. But in this moment, in my body today, I got to land in Minnesota yesterday. And since the election, just this longing, this feeling of like, I think one of the first things that came up for me, I think even heading towards this election was like, I might not be able to see my people. Like, I might not be able to go to them or them come to me. Like, I don't want to take any time together for granted, but who knows what's about to happen. And so it's been very precious, each person I've gotten to see since then, but I was really waiting for this. And yesterday I landed at Autumn's house, and one by one, her kids came home from school, which I was really glad that they all arrived one at a time, because each one, as soon as they heard my voice or saw that I was there, ran to cover the final distance to me. And I felt the same way, even though running is not like in my wheelhouse right now. But my heart ran straight to them. And then we just hugged for the longest time. And that thing that a human body can do, where it says everything it needs to in the embrace, like I felt like that with each of the kids, where I was just like pouring over them the spell of like my love and my protection. And I'm so sorry that this is happening. And I believe in you. And like, here we are together, and what a precious thing. Yeah. All of that was present. And then last night, like, it was so clear that it's like, whatever we're doing right now doesn't matter. We just all want to be on each other. And we just like sat, like, Autumn has a nice, big, cozy, comfy couch. We all sat on one end of it, like squished on each other, just like together. And I wrote something last night around how, togetherness is in some way the truest victory that I can name or understand. And it's the best medicine. And so I feel really dosed up right now with the medicine that is best for my system. That's a big part of how I am. I also want to say there's a lot that's happening right now that feels exciting, where I'm dropping out of my brain that knows things. And I'm just letting myself be like, what if I don't know anything? Like, what if everything I know is wrong? What if a lot of what I know is like known within a bubble, or known through an algorithm, or known, like, just what if there's a lot more to know than what I know? And that the hope that I'm seeking, or the feeling of possibility that I'm seeking, is in that space of the gray and the unknown and the fog, and like what I can't see yet. Like, I keep looking at past revolutionary time periods and being like, oh, like there's always this moment. And then there's revolution and revolution takes different shapes. But anyway, there's just something in me that's like, what I don't know is going to save our lives. And if all of us can orient to like not knowing, I think that we could still make it. Right. So there's something it's like a physical experience of dropping out of my head into my breath, dropping out of my head into my gut, and into the part of me that's like, you've been in a tiny enclave as well. Right. And there's a whole world out here of people, and they're not what you think. You've been told people are your enemy, and they're not. And you have to contend with that. So that's some of how I'm doing right now. How about you, my sister?
Wow. Well, thank you for that.
You look so pretty. Oh my God.
Oh, thank you.
Insane.
I love having my sister here. That's how I am, is like, I'm like, my sister's here. And it's so nice. Like all of the things that go with you visiting, from like togetherness, and like, probably listeners who've listened to our show for a long time have heard me say this before, but I love the way you smell, and I always have. Like, and I love going to visit your house because I love the way you smell and the way your house smells. And so it's always nice when you come and I'm like, my sister smells so good. And there was something really beautiful last night of like watching you and the kids reunite, and because I get to see something too every time we're apart for a long time and the kids see you again. I see their growth in relationship to you,
right?
And both physical and their emotional maturity, and how that changes over time. So the last 24 hours have been like very special in that way. And Adrian and I are coming into this call having just gotten off of a call where two different cohorts who have attended the visionary fiction writing retreat with us in Ireland came together for the first time to meet each other. And it was like such a beautiful, incredible conversation. And it just helped. I've been feeling very tired. How I've been doing is like I've been feeling really tired, and it helped kind of like snap me out of some of the tiredness is about the world and the state of the world. Some of the tiredness is about my job transition and the fact that I'm like, leaving my job of 8 years and like all of like I'm going through a lot of big changes. A lot of the exhaustion is that. And some of it is also just this time of year, and it was helpful to touch into summertime. To be like, right, there's like a whole other energy that happens in our lives. And, this is a time of resting, and that's part of why my body doesn't want to be operating at the level that society is asking it to, right, at this time. So that's part of how I'm doing too, is like, I'm like, I feel dreamy. I guess I feel dreamy.
Into a cave and dream for a couple months.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I love you as hostess as well.
Hostess
with the mostest. I also want to say it's Sag season, and it's my mom, my dad, and my sister, you, are Sagittarians. And so in a way, it feels like it's another season that is also my season. Because I'm like,
the season of influence.
I know this season very well. And it's like kind of the maximal season of celebration in our family.
Truly is.
So anyway, I'm excited that we're in it now.
Mm-hmm.
I just love everything that's sort of just been said around the check-in and around it really encapsulates so much of this moment. And especially I just want to pull out like the piece that you said, Adrian, about uncertainty. It's such a time of uncertainty. Both as people are kind of analyzing like what will Trump do, that level, but also just the level of uncertainty about sort of big uncertainty. And so we have choice around, do we bury it, make it a source of anxiety, tend to it in a way that the uncertainty makes us more fragile, more in pain, more sort of ripped apart? Or is it something where we embrace some of it? Because this is, in fact, a very uncertain time. And so I feel like we're in a kind of liminal state politically more than usual. And so there's tons of political analysts out there who kind of speak with a voice of certainty. And they basically are saying the same thing that they said pre-election. And it's a great time to recognize, for the most part, people speaking that way are great people to dismiss and listen to someone who's coming from a different place with a much more humble spot. So I really appreciate that being named in this moment of rise of totalitarianism, or however we're framing this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to get in this conversation with you, Daniel, because of all of that, because so much of, for me, I'm like, when I learned about the distinction between reform versus revolution, I was like, oh, I'm revolutionary. And I've always held my nose to try to participate in any way in the existing systems. And part of what I feel right now is like, I don't want to build up my expertise on the existing system. I really want to focus on, I'm like, there's so much we don't know. There's so much we can't know. And you are one of the people that makes it possible for me to feel that way. So you have written this article that has gone viral, completely viral, for Waging Nonviolence. It was released on Election Day. I believe you wrote it, and it was like, when you first wrote it, it was 10 ways to be prepared and grounded if Trump wins. And then you were able to shift the title as soon as that became, official. But you also wrote a book that came out this year, as Autumn mentioned, What Will You Do If Trump Wins, which is a choose your own adventure book. And it feels like you're coming at this from such a grounded place of like, I've taken a good look from a movement perspective of what this possibly means for us. And I want to give you a sense that can return you to the, just what it means to be a human who cares about changing the world under such, I don't even call leadership the right word, but under such takeover, right? Like we're in this takeover moment. So we wanted to ask you, what were you intuiting and sensing about this particular election that got you writing so coherently for us?
So first, I just want to thank you. I think the article felt like from a grounded place, and that doesn't mean I'm regularly in a grounded place around it. So I just want to like be clear.
Period.
Like I think we're
Yeah.
all joined in. Like we're all struggling to sort and make meaning. So one of the things that I think I got into my heart, especially as I was watching Biden struggling earlier on, and I thought, I remember what happened in 2016 when Trump won and people were shocked, couldn't believe it, really struggled to absorb it. And we lost a lot of time just trying to absorb the reality of and accept that and so forth. And so I thought, well, there should be some people really planning what happens if Trump wins to just kind of play that out. And I began conversations with different organizations, chatting who's thinking this question through. And for the most part, people were kind of, no, we're all in on Biden winning, or we're all in on, that's not our strategy, or we're all in on whatever thing it was. And it makes sense. We're in a time of triage. We've been in a time of triage. When you're in a time of triage, who wants to look ahead? So that made sense, and I don't feel overly judgmental about it. But I could see it was going to have a cost. And one way I saw it was, I was just chatting with some the insider political operative types, and I was asking them, so seriously, what will you do if Trump wins? And they said, I try not to think about it. I said, that's funny. But seriously, what do you do? And they said, no, actually, we don't have any plan for it. And what I realized as I was chatting with this person more and more was that it wasn't just that there was a lack of planning, but also there's a lack of agency if it came to pass. That one of the first costs would be people's sense of agency to respond, and a sense of it's too big, it's a massive takeover, it would just be so bad. And so as I just began to ask people, what do you think would happen? What's the next thing you think Trump would do? People would get frozen. And so the idea of the Choose Your Own Adventure book, sort of that style of book, emerged because I was thinking to myself, what's a way of getting people where they could see, let's say Trump makes a move, but then also we make a move. And then Trump does a move, or Trump's people does a move, and then we do a move. And so to be continually asked the question, so what would you do? And I think my intuition had a lot to do with, I want people to be in agency. I want people to have a sense of, no matter what happens, no matter how bad you might think it gets, you still have an abundant number of choices. And our choices might be limited. Our choices might be less of what we want to do. Our choices might ask us to call from resources that we haven't tapped in before. And our choices might be surprising. People who've never imagined doing acts of resistance do acts of resistance in hot times. So some of where I was just coming from was just trying to get us into some motion so that we could be moving and not in a kind of denial about. And I think another aspect of it was also understanding Trump could do a range of things, and we don't know. Will Trump be incompetent and just fractured internally and unable to move a lot forward? Will Trump be very effective and just able to just implement policy after policy? Will Trump be somewhere in between? I mean, there's a huge range. And so the uncertainty adds to our lack of agency, because for some of us, at least, we look at uncertainty and we say, well, I don't know, therefore I can't figure out. Which might not be the most useful strategy for us. That in this moment, actually, a lot of the instinctual things for us, again, you already named it, is togetherness, which is anecdotal. I mean, that is an anecdote to the kind of situation we're in and the reason we're in the situation. So that's a piece of how I was kind of putting those pieces together.
Yeah, and this is so interesting because one of the questions that we had for you was around trust versus distrust. And so I appreciate you tapping into this piece around togetherness, and Daniel, you picking it up, because there is something about uncertainty can cause freeze in, from a nervous system standpoint, like uncertainty usually causes us to, at a minimum, pause. But our nervous systems are designed to pause so that we can orient, right? And then once we orient, we make a decision and then we act on that decision. But I think in US culture, particularly in movement culture, the pause often sort of has like a sort of slide into freeze that it seems could be, I hear there is the antidote of some kind of social cohesion or togetherness is important. But that brings me to the question that we wanted to ask you about, which is about this interplay between trust and distrust. So in your article, the very first thing that you say that people should do is to trust themselves. And then the second thing is to trust each other. But you make this point around how someone like Trump is able to rise to power in conditions of massive social distrust, or their social distrust is used as a strategy. It's fomented strategically in order to promote an autocrat to power. And so I was wondering if you could just tease that apart a little bit more for us, and both in terms of how social distrust is fomented and used as a strategy, but then also when you are saying to the readers of your article and to folks that you're working with to trust themselves, where do we begin given the conditions that we're in?
Yeah, and especially since right now a lot of us might feel like, well, we just lost.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm going to walk right towards the question, but I'm going to do it by walking away.
Good, great. Love it. You're going to circle the block.
we're going to walk around. We're going to walk around. That's right. One way to just kind of zoom out is this is whatever we're seeing right now that happened in U.S. elections is a global phenomena. And so we are seeing the rise of whatever language we want to call it, but right-wing populism or totalitarianism or whatever variant authoritarianism in Hungary, in Brazil, in Turkey, and you can just walk around in the UK, in Germany. You can walk around the globe, and it is variants of a theme. And so I'm a little bit surprised when I read a bunch of analysts in the U.S. who are sort of digging into white working class voters, or is it about did people not vote because of Gaza or and there's a step back that I think folks haven't done to kind of glance around the globe, which says if you're seeing a theme that strong across the globe, it's not just a U.S. phenomena. So it's not unique phenomena to the U.S. And I think it has then we have to pull out of just U.S. dynamics of just a U.S. version of racism or U.S. versions of, and look at some broader themes. And one of the big themes we found, I've been holding this group gathering of friends who people I trust. And over the last year or so, we've just been gathering, and we just have a rule as we gather, which is no planning. And I guess we have two rules, which is no planning and anything that someone says has to be treated as true. Even if you know its opposite might also be true. So we're just exploring together what the fuck is up with these times. That's what we're exploring. And so the last session we had, one of the activities was to just list what are the different institutions that have decreased amounts of social trust, broadly speaking, in the main, what institutions do people have less trust in? So it's quick to name things like media, things like healthcare systems, things like politicians. And then it began to continue on many different institutions, beginning to get into our family. After the pandemic, a lot of us had a lot less trust in our families and our friends, even in our own selves, in the weather, right? Just the instability of the weather that we're now experiencing. And so the condition of decreased trust. So we just explored something, not sure if this is a helpful theory, but we just explored if if trust has to go somewhere, if it's like a fixed thing, so if you have a certain amount of trust and if you lose it somewhere, it has to go somewhere else, where is it going? And we kind of noted two streams, roughly, of one stream goes towards localized support, people, things you can touch, people that you're close with, community groups, religious institutions, people who are closest to you, nature, people's relationship to the divine or the God or whatever they hold on to. And another stream is people who tell you what is happening, people who have great certainty, that we increase our trust in the people who are telling you exactly how to analyze, how things are. People who are guaranteeing you results and success. And I think one version, we can see that in Trump. We can also see that in some of our own people in our own culture where we increase our confidence of, oh, we know, we've got this. Okay, next thing, we're going to do it. We just need to organize and we're going to win. Boom. Which allows people to project a kind of confidence towards us, but may not be that true. But that it's very attractive. It becomes there's attractive quality to it. So all of this is like the journey around to the question, like, why trust as a theme, which is there's a lot of less trust in society, I think, on the whole, and therefore it's disorienting. And in disorienting times, one thing that we can look for is people who will just tell us what's going on. And an alternative route is a route of trust in people and in ourselves, which isn't this the land of, I know what's going on. It's not that land. It's the land that you invite us, Adrian, of, it's the land of uncertainty. It's the land of not knowing, but it's the land of, I trust myself that when I hear crazy making, when I hear people trying to gaslight me, I'm not going to participate in that. And I will withdraw my internal consent from that part. And so that's protection from parts of society that are really operating on a gaslight thing. And so, I mean, this is consistent. What I'm saying in a way is very consistent with the field of totalitarianism and authoritarianism, where what people have identified is it's not emerging out of just pure economic conditions or just pure political conditions. It's not just that Trump is a master manipulator. It's not that Trump is uniquely qualified or uniquely unqualified. It's a social condition. That totalitarianism is a social condition that emerges when people feel isolated. They feel alone. They feel alone in their heads. They feel like they can't talk to other people. And so then they begin to look for quick answers. So that's the way in which I started to just kind of affirm we need to hold on to our own internal protections, our own internal trust of ourselves, our own internal navigator. I'm Quaker, and so it's the inner light is the way that we often speak about that as a way to kind of navigate the wise voice from within that helps us guide us through uncertain times.
It's so helpful, Daniel. It's interesting because I was just thinking a few days ago about how when I speak to people who deny climate change, one of the things I notice, or one of the things I'm often confused by in the conversation is why is it important to someone to deny that the climate is changing in response to human activity? And, because there's always that moment in the conversation where it's like, well, this is happening because of climate change. And the other person will be like, well, not really, actually XYZ, these patterns have existed for hundreds upon thousands of years. And this is actually just a part of, blah, blah, blah. And I always have this moment of pause in those conversations where my internal thought is, why is it important to you that it not be human activity that causes this? Right? Have you slowed down to think about why it's important to you to deny that human activity has something to do with this? And this is it's helpful, the orientation that that some of this is just about being able to know with certainty what is true and what is not true, that in and of itself can be motivating enough for people sometimes. Just knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so glad you raised it, Autumn, because one of the things that happens in climate, like climate psychologists talk about this as there's two major responses to the massive uncertainty of climate change. So one you've just named, which is the denialism. And then another way to handle uncertainty is to be certain it will turn out badly. Mm-hmm. Right. So one is certain.
Climate pessimism.
So often climate pessimism or climate doomism of like, I know we're just fucked. It's over. It's the end of, forget it. Da, 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 da. And both are a way to handle uncertainty by stepping into, I can't handle that amount of uncertainty. And so I snap into one direction or another, which I find myself doing around Trump. Like some dream, like I step into a dreamland state and I'm like, oh, they'll just be incompetent. I know it. And of course I don't know that. We don't know what that will be, but it is very reassuring in some ways. I find it settling from time to time to be like, oh, it's going to be that way. Or there's nothing, it's just so bad. So I think just acknowledging those as dynamics begins to help us, I think, sort. And so trust in one sense isn't trusting that voice of I need to go into certainty, but is trusting about what is my body saying? I'm tired. I'm sad. I'm exhausted. I'm happy to hug people I love. Like all those things that were check-ins at the beginning, those are the things to trust into those real parts of your life and to settle into those things. And so if your body is saying like, I'm exhausted, be exhausted. This is not a moment to like contort our bodies as much as we can do in our life. It's not a moment to contort our bodies into something that isn't supposed to be. If you're pissed and angry, be pissed and angry. Don't let someone talk you out of that. This is a moment of togetherness where everyone gets to be wherever they are.
Here we are.
Which might be every moment, but it just happens to be this moment after, a thing like this. And so it's a chance for us to dig in and to get to be with each other as humans.
Yeah. I really, really appreciate this, Daniel, because that just keeps being the thing for me as I'm like, okay, like I think for my time in movement work, it's always been like, there's action. You have to get to action. You have to like quickly know what to do and lead with some clarity. And I'm like, the thing I know most clearly is that we are all really exhausted after this year of genocide, after this effort to stop fascism, and anticipatory exhaustion is coming. And there's a real sense of like, well, what's, for those of us who have analysis around or analysis or a sense of history, there's a real sense of like, we know what this pattern leads to right now. Like there's a global trend that's moving towards fascism and towards autocracy. And we know that that's coming, but like, we're also really exhausted and like it's all connected, right? We're like being worn down. Yeah. So you've done this extensive work around the globe. And one of the things you've been learning and writing about is how movements can actually stop this spread of fascism or what movements can do in the face of it. So we wanted to ask you what you've learned about that. And then I think this might be a two-part question. You let us know in terms of what comes out of you. But for me, part of what needs to happen is the story that we're telling is not working. And we need to be humble about that. Like we have done this fear-based story. Fascism is coming. Authoritarianism is coming. Climate catastrophe is coming. Like, and all of it is not wrong. We're like these are the trends that we're witnessing. But the story that we're telling people, which is often paired with you're either with us or against us in terms of how you understand this moment and what's going to happen. Whatever that is, it doesn't seem to be working. And so I'm curious about if there's a story shift that movement needs to be making to something less binary, less linear, something that gives the average person more agency, or is it like this isn't about the story? This is about how we're going and telling the story, or something else. But like, does that all make sense as a two-part?
Yeah.
One big.
No, the second part is easy. Yes, The second part is easy. Yes,
Okay,
we
great.
need to get a new narrative, and I don't know what it is.
Great. Awesome.
But maybe somewhere in your study of how other people around the world have successfully fought totalitarianism and fascism, we might find the better story.
Yeah. What did they say? What story did they tell?
Yeah. Not fascism, Daniel.
I guess there's a couple of places to start. So I think one thing is this. So this is an interesting moment to like reorient our political map a little bit. And so what that means to me is that if we've been talking one way of our story, if we've been thinking of who are we, who's the them, this is an interesting moment to reconfigure some of that. And one example of it, so like Adrian, like you talked about being someone who is just always attracted to the revolutionary side, not interested in learning how the system currently works and just replicating or keeping it up to. People who are in that mode, who are just keeping up the system, who are maybe political allies in one sense of sense, they have a very interesting role now because many of them are under attack. They will be targets, both quite literally and figuratively. Their institutions, their bureaucracies that they've created of the EPA or the IRS or the health, name it, are under some version of attack, both at the federal level and all the way down to city and local levels. A friend of mine who called me and said, I'm a librarian and I'm worried because they're looking at book bans and they're looking at arresting librarians, giving them felonies. So the fear is one thing, and we're kind of talking about that, and then the reorienting begins to see there's new opportunities afoot that weren't there before, because folks who are under attack and see someone offering them a lifeline will react differently than they would at another moment in history. So that means potential allies who haven't been there before, and allies not in the sense that they are in agreement about, but as their institution begins to buckle or break, they may look for new things to hook onto. And they have pieces of wisdom of how to run certain things that suddenly could get pulled into. So that doesn't have to be all of our work. Some of us are not bridge building people, and that's not our jam. But we have to recognize that some of us who are bridge building people are going to need some shots at trying these things out, some attempts we're going to try to re-navigate. So just, you asked about global. So an example that I keep reaching for is Otpor, who was a group of Serbian youth who they were involved in overthrowing their dictator, Milosevic. I think the reason that I keep coming up with it, they're not the closest example politically to our situation, but the reason I like them so much is they were very clear about what they were trying to do, and they were very funny about it. So a lot of like the early tactics that they did were just trying to poke fun at was an established dictator. And so in an atmosphere in which people were very serious and tight, a lot of their actions were like silly things. Like they would make a cake on the sort of in their sort of equivalent of kind of an Independence Day kind of operation. So they made a cake, they put it out in the city square, and then they just chopped up the cake into lots of different pieces. And they began serving it and saying, this is what Milosevic is doing. He's chopping us up into lots of different identity groups. So there's this particular group, there's this particular group, there's this particular group. And they just began saying like, this is what he's doing to us. He's cutting us up.
Wow.
And then when there was I'm losing words here. What happens when an eclipse. So there's an eclipse. And so they brought out a telescope. They brought a telescope in the city square and had people like come out and say, look, you can watch the eclipse in our special like telescope. And so people would peer in, and then they would see a picture of Milosevic covering up the sun. And they say, he's just blocking everything out.
Yes.
And so they're poking fun at, they're just, this isn't direct confrontation, but humor matters. Attitude matters a great deal. In those stories, they're saying a couple things, right? The story that they're building is, we represent the whole of the cake. We stand for everybody in the cake. Not that slice or that slice, but we're the people who stand for the whole cake. We're the people who are up against the one who's blocking out the sun for you. So every time your life is a little dimmer, that's because of that man right there. So they began using that as their sort of basis of organizing. And something else they did that I think we're going to need to unearth, is some symbols. So they used a symbol of a raised fist, a clenched fist. That was their image that they graffitied everywhere. That was their symbol. But it became just a way that they would allow people to very easily signal that they were in alignment. Not necessarily with everything, but some ways to just show like, no, you're in this. You got the raised fist, cool. We're in it together.
I love that.
And some loose ways to do that. And that, I think another piece that another example of that I drew from was in Denmark, in resistance to Nazi Germany, the Danes, they experimented for a while with a kind of violent revolution against the Nazis, and they found it very hard to keep up. And so what they realized was it just became too easy to kind of get pocketed, right? Like you've got a little armed resistance here, like a little armed resistance here, a little armed resistance here. And so they picked another strategy, which they said, let's actually try to figure out strategies that lots and lots and lots of people could do at once. And so one of the actions was wearing a paperclip. There's some Danish meaning behind this. I didn't catch it, but they wore a paperclip. Very simple. Everyone had it. An act of resistance to say, we're not with this. And they followed it up by doing actions that were mass participatory, like a day of a slowdown, where for 1 minute, the entire city, everyone would just stop for 60 seconds. And so there's these video images of like trains and buses and everything, and then it just like freezes for 60 seconds.
Wow.
And what they're doing is they're creating lots of people, a story that many of us are opposed to. Now, this is not that moment. We're not in that moment yet. But I think we have to like imagine ourselves to get to that moment. And so it's not going to be framed. It's not everyone. That's not the story we're going to get to of full participation of everyone everywhere. But as the story of like Trump falls away a little bit and it's more about the actual policies that Trump wants to do, there's a bigger we behind this story that elections just told us. There's a much bigger story. And we have to get curious about it because it isn't just going to be framed as my left policy issues or my whatever. But there's a bigger story that's going to unfold. And in that time, we have to tell that story, convince people, bring people in, but also begin getting people into larger scale resistance strategies. That's largely disobedience. So for Denmark, they began escalating up, which included mass strikes, included mass demonstrations before their king was a kind of image, a hero, heroine kind of operation. And so they began developing a whole culture that was about disobeying the Nazi regime and making it impossible for them to continue to carry out, changing signs. So it's just being difficult for them to, because they didn't know where they were, right? So you just change signs and get them lost and all that kind of stuff. So those are the kind of things that we're going to get to. And I'm acting prefiguratively in a way because we're not there right now. And I'm aware of that. And that makes it a little bit challenging. But nothing that we do at this moment or for the next period of time will be successful at that level. And so we have to relax ourselves about not being successful at that level, but instead thinking about power differently, thinking about power less about persuasion to the opposition. We're not going to persuade Trump into, I think we're aware of that. And so getting real about power is more about settling ourselves back down into analysis of this is about us building a resistance squad that both articulates a visionary future, but also says we're not going to go along with these policies. A free people cannot be conquered. That kind of attitude.
I love that, Daniel. You know, as you were speaking, I was remembering General Baker, who was a Detroit organizer who passed a few years ago, but he said to Detroit organizers, you all are always so concerned with how do we build up? How do we get more people here? What you need to be concerned with is how to be ready when they show up. And that's, as you were speaking, I was thinking about that that prefigurative approach for organizers, for movement workers makes a ton of sense, because right now people are like, it's not such a big, the folks who voted for Trump, or the folks who are like, I'm not so worried about it. They're like, it's not a big deal. Y'all are just chicken littles out here. And like, everything is not that big of a deal. We just need some change, blah, blah, blah. And I think for many of us, we're like, you're not understanding yet that your family members are going to be deported. You're not understanding yet that like these hurricanes are going to increase, and we're not going to have the leadership or the government, if Project 2025 is allowed to roll out, you're not really understanding yet what's going to happen, but you will. Yeah. You will. If they roll out what they are interested in, if they roll out even 10% of what they're interested in doing, then a lot more people are going to be like, I'm upset and I want to do something about it. And so I think there is that being ready to mobilize people as they turn away from the existing systems and say, this isn't working for me and for my family, which is often how it happens. It's like until it comes to your door. There's also something that's been floating around in my head a lot, which is that I think a lot of this election, and I think a lot of what's happening globally, right, is about men, and particularly white men, who are losing power that for centuries has been their power. Mm-hmm. And what they've been losing at the kitchen table, right? Where they're like, okay, my kids are being queer, they're being trans, they're being interracial, they're being, they don't want to do this. They no longer respect me in the same way. I think a lot of what's being lost at the kitchen table, they're like, well, we will do it through policy. We will force you to stay in a situation which we're in power. And I'm like, a lot of people will reject that necessarily, right? As they start to experience, I'm like, oh, what you really want is this. They'll expose themselves. And our friend Jessie Maceo Vega Frey wrote this other piece that I posted about guerrilla warfare for organizers in this time. And the last line of it is talking about that at a certain point, these kind of governments, authoritarian governments, go so hard with their harm and their violence, and they overreact and they overact. And so then people just are like, oh, you've shown the truth of what you are trying to do, which is to destroy and control. And we don't want that. And, when you were talking about symbol, I was like, we need a heart. We need to talk about love. Love is at the root of what we're doing, right? Like, how do we tell this as a love story? So anyway, it's so generative to talk with you about all this stuff, because I'm like, oh yeah. Like, again, in the unknown, right? Like if this is fertile ground where we're like, we can apply some of the best of what has happened, and there's going to be a need to let culture emerge from us that is compelling for our people to turn towards, right? Then all of a sudden you're asking a different question, and the energy around it actually feels curious as opposed to despairing. It's like, okay, well, this is our time in history, and how can we get curious about what we can generate as possibility and generate as some kind of solid ground for our people to step onto when this crisis unfolds.
You may have just found our paperclip, Adrian.
We need to find our paperclip. Exactly. But I think part of what, as you were saying it, I'm like, I saw that quick rush where people were like, I'm going to wear a blue bracelet or something. There's this performative thing where it's like, oh, you're not picking them. You're not actually, it's not ground up, right? There's something about elite, the elite trying to keep putting forth elite-based strategies, right? And I even have been really trying to be self-critical. I'm like, okay, like there's a way that the whole left has become elite in terms of how we hold our ideas. That we're like, you have to buy into the full analysis and get the whole language together and get it all. You have to be quote unquote educated in the ways of the left in order to participate anymore. And even in that, we're going to fight and keep dominating each other. So I'm like, even if just the left was able to be like, what if you were all wrong? What if we've been in the hands of philanthropy and in capitalism? What if we're not above any people anywhere? What if we're just like all the other nations that are going through this? And what if we have to humble ourselves to be part of something different? And, we also live in a nation that, as far as I understand it, population-wise, is one of the largest nations to ever come to this precipice of totalitarianism, right? Like literally just in terms of the people and the diversity of people who are caught up now in this mega story. Because I think that's a big part of what we've been looking at. I'm like, but how could anyone with any kind of color at all in their skin go along with this? How could any woman, how could any person who could give birth, how? And it's like the story can catch anyone into it. The story, whether it's the American dream or manifest destiny or whatever it is, the story that people can be better than others has so far been more compelling than the story that we can be better together. And we're in this moment now where it's like, can we shift that? Can we truly shift that? And I love what you're saying, because you're like, yes, but slow, but listen, but deepen into the relationship. Yeah.
I just want to give an example of a story. Like, since I picked on Upward, I'll keep using that. One of the tactics that they did was people would get beaten up by the police, and then they would take a picture of the person who was beaten up, and they would go to the police officer's house, and they would show those images. Like they put them on a big, piece of paper so people could see writ large. The pressure wasn't to the person; it was to the neighbors. That's who they were really targeting. Was
right.
Your neighbor is doing this. And just to escalate, show how they were escalating, when they found some of the police officers who were some of the worst, who would just beat them up regularly, they would then go, controversially, they would go to their kids, the police officers' kids' school, and go to their school, again with those pictures, and people who had gotten beaten up, and say, this person is beating us up. This is what he's doing.
Please
and put pressure on this. Say it again.
Whoa. I said, please go talk to your daddy, girl. Yeah.
Exactly. Which is...
Plus he knows what he's doing at home. Anyway, yes. Sorry.
Yeah. Which is the reason it's so, I think, such a powerful action is it's an example of social pressure, but it was invitation. It wasn't condemnatory alone. It was the statement they would regularly make is, even if it's not now, you will have a chance to join our revolution. And they would say that repeatedly to all the different folks.
Yes.
Which meant later, years later, after Milosevic continued to be awful, things got worse. Milosevic made some internal mistakes, as the dictator will eventually do. And the police themselves were given orders to shoot protesters, and they wouldn't do it.
Wow.
And so, again, I'm just trying to prefigurative here, let's see into that future. And then for that to be possible, for that kind of recalcitrance on police and military, both were given orders, to withdraw their consent, that has to be built. That doesn't just happen because they have a day of. That becomes built. And that becomes built by having a regular amount of invitation. And again, we don't all have to be making the same invitation, the same people. But that was across the board, like across the society. Upward made this invitation to government workers to say, do your jobs, hold ethical boundaries, refuse to take orders from Milosevic when he's telling you to do things that you know are wrong. Don't quit. Stay in those jobs and resist. And so that's what we're doing now. Then that's what this moment is. So that's when we get to cheer on. Oh, who's the Fed secretary? I don't remember the name of these roles, but whoever the Treasury Secretary is, who announced when he was asked, "Will you quit if Trump asks you to?" And he said, "No." He's now. We need to tell the story that he's now in our movement of disobeying an attempted totalitarian operator, and that he's signaling to other people, we're not going to just go along with it. A free people will not be conquered like that.
There's something about growing the we.
Well, yeah, I want to just say, Daniel, and I think even maybe coming from me, this will probably be received as like an unpopular opinion or a controversial statement to our listening audience. But here we are. We're out on these limbs together. That I'm like, yeah, the next phase of our movement can't be the all cops are bastards phase of movement. You know what I mean? And really hearing and appreciating what you're naming, that like not everyone has to be able to make the invitation, but some of us have to be willing to make the invitation to find who our allies are in these who are the allies of we ultimately want freedom and thriving, even in these places that we inside of the left have villainized and refused the existence of any kind of like progressive thinking there, and because there really has been, and it's easiest to see it with police departments, but there's so many ways that the institutions of bureaucracy that exist across the entirety of society. There are so many ways that on the left, we do have a tendency to vilify the institutions themselves and the actors within them. And that's sort of like, it's interesting thinking about even the binary of reform versus revolution as being that in of itself is a limitation of political thinking that we came up in, right? That like we believe that we had to either be revolutionaries or be within the state actors, as opposed to it being possible to both like reach for governing power while also holding out a broader vision of a different kind of society.
And it always takes both.
It always takes all of it. That it always takes all of it. So, and here's where my brain is going with this, which is like, there's a lot of things that we're going to have to be willing to do, and this is why I've been loving being in conversation with you, Daniel, and reading the work that you're putting out, because you have such clarity about the like, here are some of the things that people are going to have to be willing to do. At least some people will have to be willing to disobey, and I really appreciate that. And I'm thinking about like, what are the things that are going to get in people's way of being willing, and the thing that keeps coming up in my brain in this moment is like deep, deep shame, because what is true right now from my standpoint is that we have been very wrong. We've been wrong in our purity. We've been wrong in our political practices. And many of us on the left have been saying this for some time. Like, it's not a new idea that the like path that we've been going down on, and all this cancel culture and all the purity politics and like making people have to know things in order to be here. Like we've been saying for some time that it's wrong, but now we're really starting to see like what are the effects of, letting rejection of our identities be the primary thing that informs how we act, which is, I think that's one way of diagnosing what's been going on, right? It's like, if you feel so rejected by a society, then like that is going to inform the way that you move in your organizing, right? And so our organizing has been very informed by a spirit of like rejection and exile. And like, that's just wrong. It's not the actual society that we want. And so I think that there's shame that's happening inside of many of us right now. And shame does not help people to act, shame can help people to act in ways that are not in service of thriving, but,
right. To become more covert or more.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm just thinking about that, about like how there's the, like, what do we, one of the questions we were going to ask you is like, what do we need to be prepared to do in the next 100 days or the first 100 days of the administration and but there's something else that's stirring in me right now. I'm trying to figure out how to even ask it, but it's like, how do we get past the ways that shame actually inhibits people from acting in service of their ideals, and the shame that organizers, I think, are carrying around how wrong our practices have been.
Well, you said a kind of heretical thing. And I think heresy might be you did. And I feel like heresy might be a gift to the movement right now for us to get to say and experiment with some heretical things. So let me try one.
Mean?
Oh yeah, can you slow it down and define heresy for us?
Help.
Yeah,
for the non-theologians in the room.
Is that about Jesus? What is that?
It is.
So I grew up in a Baptist tradition, and so in the Baptist tradition, when you were outside of the sort of the orthodox the way people believed, the things that you're supposed to believe, you're doing heresy. You're practicing heresy, and those could be referred to as sinful ways or any number of different things. But that heresy, especially, I think of as we have faith statements in our movement. And when we challenge those faith statements, we're speaking heresy. Yes. And that this may be a moment in which we may be open to some more heresy. As an example, one inside of me that I wondered. And I promise I wouldn't say anybody, so I'm just telling you two. But what I wondered about was... what if instead of having a movement that's built on winning, we had a movement that's built on losing? And that we honored and valued losing. That we are losing people who've lost rights, who've lost homes, lost people that we care for. We're not a winning movement. And that rather than making that our selling point, join us so you can win, it's a selling point to just lose. So I actually tried this with a few people of like, is there any way we could make that into an action or thing or something? And I didn't find the formulation, but there's something very precious there that I want to just honor about we've really built up a story when we organize, we win. Yeah. That is in contradiction to how I've experienced the last 43 years of my life. Mm. That a lot of organizing has resulted in a lot of loss. Sometimes very precious, sometimes devastating, sometimes worth it, sometimes not. That's a more complex story, but it's also something that feels more honoring what my reality has been. I don't know what to do with it because I'm not trying to join for the sake of loss. That's not why I'm trying to join. I'm not of a belief that we will guarantee loss. I don't believe any of those things. But I'm just trying to experiment with something that feels different than fundraising off of, you know what, we're going to do this thing, we're going to win. Because to answer your question, Autumn, the next 100 days is most likely going to be a tremendous amount of loss.
Yeah.
And very little of which will we be able to have much impact on. Just for those who want, since you asked like a mechanical question that you didn't get all the way into,
go for it.
Join with like politics of it. So like Senator Schumer has been very quiet. He's sort of the, someone that the right it often looks to for like, what's he up to, and whatever he's up to, we're anti that. So during these nomination process, he's been very quiet. He hasn't had a lot to say. And the thinking here is he's aware that the more noise he makes, the easier it gets to nominate people. Because he's aware that Trump's so clear that a big part of Trump's power sits with being in opposition to Democratic effort, the left's effort. Mm-hmm. And so there's some level of wisdom, and I'm not telling people to not be active on nominations, but I'm mindful of the reactionary quality inside of us to just go out and do things, just immediately be loud about it. If we think Gates is awful, if we think this new person is awful, if we think we should go out and say that very loudly, is not necessarily a source of our wisdom. And that this period, I think, is a really good period of time up until the Trump until he's in, is a good time for us to really take stock of our internal state carefully. And so when I wrote the Choose Your Own Adventure, I noticed that there were kind of like a phase 1 and a phase 2 of like the first phase. The phase 2 gets to like, how do we policy-wise, how do we stop, how do we combat, how do we secure, how do we protect at that level. But the phase 1, before Trump is in power, the things that seem to be the most effective are a lot of internal base building, getting your people in line, checking in with your folks at a deep level. What do you really need over this period of time that you think is coming? What are the resources you have? What are the resources you don't have access to? What are the resources that others can share with? What's the psychological shape? Like, just for me, like I've noticed when I get moments of that I don't have to do anything, I'm vacuously filling it, like playing video games or like watching TV, knowing that that's not the most helpful for me. And so when I attempt to go into what is more helpful to me, I'm remembering, I need to spend more time with people, on the phone with people, chatting, connecting with other human beings, building my network of people who will have my back when X, Y, or Z hits the fan.
Yeah.
And that really should be honored and not pushed into strategizing for the next 100 days at that level, because there's so much uncertainty, but also because the emotional impact of us being reactionary for 100 days sounds awful. Just every day waking up, reading the newspaper, what's Trump say? And I say, I've got to do something. That sounds like an awful 100 days. It will be chaotic. It will be rough. It will be a lot of bad policies day after day. I mean, we're feeling it, right? We're like centering into it, right? So it's like, it's going to be that ride. And one way we can really disadvantage ourselves is if we tell a story, we've got to do each thing. Find your lane. I mean, I talk in the article about some of the different lanes of like protecting people or just being in the disruption or defending civic institutions or building alternatives. Be in your lane. Honor that lane. We don't have to do everything. We're not going to. And again, I think the story of like, we're going to win. And the people who are trying to mount me to like stop every nomination, I can't join it. I can't join it energetically.
I love that.
And I'm aware that it may not even be good strategy, but it doesn't join with my feeling state. And that, it actually runs against my feeling state. And that's an indication of something that I really want us to honor.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Daniel, part of what you're speaking about is like, the thing that's coming to me is the allegory of Plato's people in the cave. And they're sitting in the cave watching the light reflect on the wall and the shadows on the wall and thinking that that's the world, and having their whole lives tied up in watching those shadows on the wall, not recognizing that they could stand up, turn around, walk out of the cave and actually be in the world. And there's something about these kind of political moments that feel a lot like that, where I'm like, Trump, especially, one of his gifts is creating shadows on a cave wall that then everyone turns and either gets terrified or reacts to, or is like, I'm going to stop that shadow or whatever. But like, so much of it is shadows. And a lot of it is bark and not bite. A lot of it is, right, just filling space. But we can either be watching the Trump show and in the Trump show all the time, or we can choose something else to do. And I keep thinking about like how I got through the first Trump presidency was in a lot of ways being like, I'm not going to be in reaction to him. I'm not going to live my life with him in charge of it. So I will be a part of movements that decide what they want to do and do actions, collective actions together. But the movements I'm most moved by, the movements like literally like that, I'm like, oh, I will give money or I will take action, I will do stuff, are visionary. And they're like, we're building something, and we're building it through the openings available in the current system and beyond it. But we're actually in a building mode and not living our life on the tether of whatever he says and does each day. And that leads into, I think, this next question we wanted to ask, because there's something about being on the tether, being in relationship to him, and then following the rules, obeying in advance, right? Being like, oh, you're going to do this, we're going to go ahead and do this. And we already see it with different groups being like, oh, we're not going to make statements that we would have made 2 days ago. We're not going to speak up against this. We're not going to, we're not going to put ourselves in the line of fire. And, there's a way, right? There's certain places where it's like, that's the most strategic thing, particularly if your bread and butter is all philanthropic, right? It's like, we're in this really interesting moment right now where I think we're going to have to figure out, like, what does our relationship to money actually mean for us, and us in movement and us beyond movement. Like, I think this is going to be a moment where the economy for what it means to want to change the world is already changing so much, and I think it's going to continue to change. But this thing of obeying in advance, it feels like one of the ways that we go ahead and opt into totalitarianism or opt into a fascist future before it's ever laid out, before it's even a question that's directly asked to us. We're going ahead and doing it. And so much of what you've been sharing today is about resistance and disobedience and small, I love, the small slowdowns, right? Which when I think about our slave ancestors, enslaved ancestors, it was like some of the most resistant things they could do was just moving a little slower and divesting some of their attention, some of their time, some of their energy, some of the quality of their work, withholding, starving that system out. And so we wanted to ask you, what are some small ways that you think that people and communities, and here we really want to talk not just about people who identify as being in movement, but just people, anyone, anywhere, can practice disobedience that might not actually occur to us now, but it could really matter.
So Timothy Snyder, who wrote a book called On Tyranny, I believe it was after the first Trump election, was the person who kind of first alerted me to this huge dynamic that after totalitarians get into power, people accommodate to it and they think, what will he not like? Let me not do that thing. Yeah. And that becomes, there are obviously reasons to do that, which is let's try to accommodate our lives. Let's try to stay safe. I can honor that. But as a mass strategy, it has terrible consequences because what it does is it starts to, you don't have to, most of authoritarian power isn't affected by repression. It's mostly out of the fear of repression. You only repress, you look at dictators around the globe, they don't do mass repressions for the most part regularly. It's occasional. A high stakes thing here and a high stakes things there. And then everybody knows don't do that kind of thing anymore. And they get the memo. Yeah. If people don't get the memo, it actually becomes very hard for authoritarian to stay in power. That's the basic thing. Authoritarians, they don't do anything, right? Like, let's just remind ourselves, like, Trump doesn't do anything. He doesn't feed us. He doesn't cook. He doesn't water plants or gardens. He doesn't mow lawns. He doesn't drive buses. He doesn't do anything. He has no skills that you know what I'm saying? And so we just have to remind ourselves, like, all of those behaviors that we do that contribute to the running of society, that's how society runs. And we either obey the people who tell us what to do or we don't. That's our choice. And so there's things that, like, I think nonprofits, for example, I'm particularly worried about. As I heard nonprofits and sort of as they're consulting with their lawyers, do you think we could do this now? And I think that's the wrong set of questions. And it will lead us into a bad place if we're driven by what is legally wise. Partially because lawyers as a profession are conservative, and faced with uncertainty, they get us more conservative and encourage us to be more conservative. Right. And so if you ask a lawyer right now, is it wise to poke at the IRS? They might say no. Is it moral? Is it on our mission? Is it the thing that our people want us to do? That should be the guiding questions. So that's very important for any of us who are in base building organizations, who have any kind of accountability structures, who have any kind of, we just really have to use this moment to respond to what is it that people need out of this moment from us. That's going to be a challenge, and we're going to be able to watch how, based on how behaviors happen, what's driving what. And I want us to not be too judgmental in this sense, because some people will be making decisions for reasons that might be that, but aren't apparent. So, like, folks who are doing sanctuary movement work might be very conservative in how they look and move in some of these times, knowing that greater repression might be right around the corner. And so they're making some judgment calls. And so this isn't the moment for like, I'm not inviting us into a purity politics of because someone makes a call that doesn't make sense for us, we get on them. But I do want to get curious about it and find out what's that mean for you. I mean, the ones I'm already hearing of self-censorship are, I don't want to join because I'll be on a list.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into the streets because I'm worried they'll take pictures of me. Those are already examples of us engaging in a self-censorship operation. And so my encouragement is get on the lists that you think are a little pushy for you. Show up in the streets if that's your thing. Show up in the streets and places where you think it's pushy for you. I think political space that you don't use will shrink on us. So this is a good time to use political space.
Oh, that's
I love
a good
that,
way
Daniel.
to put it, Daniel.
I really love that because I think people forget that it's like we determine whether something's growing or shrinking. We're always the one who's, it's like if we're not willing to participate, this is always my thing. I'm like, if you're not willing to do it, no one else is going to do it. Like when I see people post online, sometimes I'm like, oh, you're posting, but you would never do those things. And you don't, like I see people post about stuff. I'm like, but you don't do that. I know you. You never ever like really think about like what you will do. And then I love what it's like, pick the thing that feels right for you, but do something.
Yeah. And then I want to just invite into like later down the road. Yeah. And I wanted to invite into like later down the road, some things that I've been thinking about as I'm just trying to figure out like one strategy that a lot of the left will engage in is let's get Trump out through elections. Cool. Mm-hmm. If Trump really does hold on to power, setting up elections, creating some way that becomes sort of the MAGA establishment becomes really established, we may have to pick other strategies for displacing. So I've been thinking about sort of nonviolent strategies for mass mobilization, and so that's the category that I've been thinking about. And so 3 that I just want to like throw out to like play with. One has been, we've been having conversations about tax resistance. And so there's some groups who are already talking about using tax resistance around Gaza because it's a very direct corollary. And it's largely emerging out of religious organizations. There's a conversation. Yeah. As a tactic, it isn't the only thing. And I just want to preface, like, again, I'm trying to join the loser party or whatever this is. But like at the beginning, any strategy that we do that's mass resistance will be ineffective at the beginning of it. It will not be powerful enough to displace. And so for those of us who don't want to do that thing, you don't have to do it, but you do have to honor that those of us trying these things out, you may need us later.
Right.
And so it may grow into a thing. Yeah. And at this moment of loss, it's a hard thing for us to kind of hold on to. But as like tax resistance as a strategy has been helpful in other places, not only for its power of financial, that's not actually its greatest strength. The greatest strength is it becomes a story of disobedience. It's such a brazen statement of we're not willing to go along with. And so it becomes a statement that then inspires other people to take greater risks in terms of disobeying unjust authority. And so I think that's one strategy that I've been just sort of like following, experimenting with, listening to. I think another one, I mentioned the kind of mass slowdowns, and those get joined up with large strikes. And so UAW's called for a general strike in 2028, and there's been other folks who've been like Sunrise Movement has been already doing climate strikes. And strikes have been in many authoritarian regimes in terms of displacing fascist regimes. Strikes have been a very critical component for many of them, not all, but many of them as a strategy, because it becomes a way for people to not just show their opposition to, similar to a march, but also to make it very difficult for such a authority to operate. And just for those of us who are struggling to like remember that, it's helpful for me to remember what happened in COVID and how quickly the U.S. economy just like, remember, people didn't have toilet paper. It like really like shook. It's a very delicate system. And it's not built on, it's not a robust, I mean, it feels robust, but it is not in certain ways a robust system. And therefore, it's vulnerable, has a lot of vulnerability. And so small strikes, I don't think we need a full general strike of 10% of the population. A very small targeted strikes in certain locations on the economy can really disrupt and change a lot of it. And then the third for us to be open for, is Trump's going to make mistakes.
Indeed.
And to capitalize on those. And so in the Choose Your Own Adventure book that that style book that I wrote of, what do we do if Trump wins? One avenue is there's a tax resistance movement, it grows. And then it suddenly realizes Trump overreaches where what happens in this case? In this case, it was he tries to shut down the EV sector, the electric vehicle sector, and tries to force them into stop doing electric vehicles. And UAW bolts, doesn't do it. And the thing about power holders is at this moment, Trump may be at the apex of power. We don't know. But over the next period of time, he may be at a kind of the story of his strength may be, we never know when it's going to be at the height of it, but that it can very quickly tumble.
Wow.
And so there's a Turkish sociologist, Timur Kuran, and what he talks about the unanticipated revolution. And he says there's these moments where no one saw it coming is the basic analysis. I mean, it just comes down to like, nobody saw that, this leader in Iran or this leader or whatever, he just cites the different sources, would just fall apart. And it happens very quickly. And if you just think about it, like very few of Republicans like Trump, like very few of the elites within his sphere, do they like him as a person? Yeah. And they have lots of beef with him. I mean, Lindsey Graham is still bitter about all the stuff he said to him, but he acts like a sycophant. And so any number of these people may suddenly switch up. And it takes a sort of a moment. So I'm envisioning these just to help me in the days when I feel really dreary about the future of, some of these things could happen. And some of them I know are challenging. Some that I know I could help build. Some of them I'm not so certain about. But for us to be engaged in what you do on the show of visionary storytelling of what could happen in the future, of how we make it through, becomes really necessary, because I think another way we can obey this moment is creating an inevitability of defeatism. One way that we can really support Trump right now in the MAGA movement is creating a story of defeatism that Gates gets out. So Gates' nomination was, he decided to pull himself out of the running. And then one story we could tell ourselves is, well, he's just going to get another guy. And we miss the moment to acknowledge a natural win. Mm-hmm. Right. Probably going to be worse. Right. It gets even worse. And we miss the moment to acknowledge this is really important. This is a moment of victory. This is a moment of, there are some moral lines that couldn't politically get crossed. And that's important. And that's important because it reduces Trump's power that he can do anything he wants to do. We've already seen he couldn't do anything he wants to do right away. And so we just have to catch those moments and kind of hold on to them. It doesn't mean that everything, it doesn't mean the loss won't happen, but it does mean he's not an all-powerful entity. And that's already been proven just in the last 24 hours.
Beautiful.
That's good news for us.
That is good news. Ain't that good news?
Oh, no. Daniel, I am so grateful for your mind and your heart in this conversation. I feel like you've been, like, it just feels like small possibilities, like there could be massive. Like I keep thinking that same kind of nonlinear thing where I'm like, we actually don't know. Like everything could be different by January. Everything could be different by March. We actually don't know what the conditions are. And so just, I feel like you're planting these seeds of possibility for us. And I feel like I've learned a lot. Autumn, do you have any other questions? How do you feel? Do you feel satisfied?
I mean, I could talk to you for hours, and I plan to. And I know we're past time for this conversation, but I would love to I think it would be really cool for us to have a part 2 conversation with you, Daniel, like in the spring, just to like see where things are and see how things are shaping up, since so much of what we talked about today was prefigurative. And just thank you so much for we had to do some magic to make this conversation happen between the three of us. And I appreciate you being willing to be with us, especially right now.
Yeah. And I really, really want to say a big thank you for this reframing of winning. I keep being like, we need to redefine what winning is. I've really been working from a place of like, winning is not dominance over anyone else. It's like repair and healing. And like, we have a lot of repair to do. And the greatest victory for us would be like a repaired world. Right. But I love this idea of also like we are people who have lost, and the loss is what brings us all together. And
and Norma, with the last guest that we had on it's deep, the connection between what you're naming and what Norma Wong was talking about, who was the last guest that we had on the show. And she talked about how one of the things that she said to us was being on the right side of history is no guarantee that you will be in a state of thriving or survival. And it was like, and actually, like, when I think about like some of the people in the last year who've like self-immolated as an act of resistance against the genocide in Gaza, and I'm like, there's something that's so profound and so powerful in saying, I literally am going to die for this cause. And I'm not saying that like it's like not every strategy is for everybody. I'm not advocating for self-immolation as a political strategy, but there is something powerful in recognizing that everyone in my life knows that I'm kind of like obsessed with death anyway, but like there is something really powerful in just being able to own and honor that like the one thing that is true about all of us is that we are all beings that will die.
We gonna die.
Like we are all going to die. And what an honor it is to get to participate in moving the world towards freedom.
That's right.
That is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to get to know that we did in the time that we were alive. Yeah. And like, ultimately, we never actually will get to know the ultimate impact of anything that we do, right? Like that's actually part of that's part and parcel with the project of living, is like not knowing what the ripples are.
It's exactly that. I mean, I've been slowly working on this poem that's about, I only have a set number of breaths left. And what I keep wanting to ask myself is like, what are you going to spend your breath on? Like if everyone gets a bucket of breath, or everyone, it's like you just get this to spend your life on, and like, what are you going to pour it into? And I'm like, if I say I want to pour it into love, then that reshapes my orientation of life, right? Versus like, I gotta fix this organization. I'm like, no, I've got to keep pouring my breath into love, and like that, the form is going to change and change and change and change and change, or pour it into freedom. Pour it into revolution, pour it into being an earthling, right? That I'm like,
a little earthling.
I am an earth. We are earthlings who die. Those are the things that are true about
us.
But there's something beautiful too, that death is not just for people, but also for everything we build, right? It's like every house we build returns to the earth eventually. Every nation we build so far passes or turns or changes or whatever. And that impermanence is actually maybe the most comforting thing we can turn to right now. It could be. Uncertainty, impermanence. Yeah. I'm glad we gave people so much to work with, Daniel. I adore you. I'm glad we got to be back together with you in this way.
It's really lovely. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to our show. We're on Instagram at End of the World PC. We're also on Facebook at End of the World Show. So long may they reign.
I'm like, I don't want to be on Facebook anymore. I don't want to be around Zuckerberg at all. Anyway, okay, you can make a sustaining donation to our show by visiting our page at patreon.com/End of the World Show. We like it.
Another incredible thing you can do to help our show sustain itself is to write us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're an iPhone person, thank you.
And I always like to add that if you're not an iPhone person or an Apple person, surely there's somewhere else you can tell people the good news that we exist. Okay? How to Survive the End of the World is produced and edited by the sweet Zach Rosen. And the transcripts are in both our show notes and on our website at endoftheworldshow.org.
Music for today's show comes from Autumn, the band, and Tunde Alaniran.
We love y'all.